Welcome to the Journey Church podcast. We hope that this message will challenge you and encourage you on your journey of faith. If you would like to learn more about Journey Church, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and online at thejourneychurch.cc. Now enjoy the message.
Third string, baby. That's what happens. Third string. All right. You guys like this? Jingle bells, surfing swells. All right. What's the dad joke time? What's the favorite book of the Bible for a surfer? You can't say it, Tara. Tara knows. Come on. Let's have a guess. Anybody? Give me a guess. No? Deuteronomy. All right, I'm going to tell you guys a funny story. We have like group stuff at our house pretty often, and one of the things we like to do on occasion is called story night, and we've done it with Journeymen also, and that's where like everybody's there and we count, okay, there's 18 people here, and we write 1 through 18 on pieces of paper, drop them in a cup, pass them around, and you draw a number. I tell everybody, even if you don't think you have a story, draw a number, because somebody's going to talk about like this car that they had, and you're going to be like, oh yeah, that reminds me of this car that I had. So this story, not my story, but it came from one of our story nights, all right? And so I got this brother named Hal. We call him Uncle Hal. Hal's, I'm 50, Hal's getting ready to turn 70, he still surfs, and I tell him all the time, like, you got to keep surfing because I'm looking at you, and when you quit, I'm like, I got 20 years, you know? So this story came from him. This is like in the late 60s, I think. He and a bunch of guys went down to Sebastian Inlet. There's a big campground there, like a Park Service campground, and it's in Florida. And they went down in the wintertime to go like just camp for an indefinite amount of time and surf and just hang out and live the hippie life. And so he's telling this story, and he says, you know, down there when the sun went down, like they just rolled up the sidewalk. You know, there was nothing to do after dark at all except get into trouble. So they did. But so they hatched this plan one night, one evening, as you know the sun's getting ready to go down. They had somebody caught a bunch of shrimp there in the inlet with like a cast net that they had or whatever, and they're like living off the land and, you know, hippie stuff. So they hatched this plan that they're going to go. They knew there was a citrus orchard, like down A1A a little bit, a few miles, and they were going to go in there after dark and get some free oranges. So they took a sleeping bag after dark, and Hal and this other guy get dropped off by the third guy. He's going to go down, wait a little while, and then come back and pick them up. And they're gonna take this sleeping bag in there and fill it full of oranges and bring it back out. So they get dropped off, and there's like nothing out here at all. There's no street lights. It's just the night sky full of stars. So they set off. And when he told it was like a 20-minute story, and I'm not going to tell it in that great a detail, but it's very riveting when he did it. But they went through a ditch, like a big drainage ditch, and when they got down into the bottom of it, and it's dark, like they can't see what's going on at all. When they get down to the bottom of it, it's mud up to their waist. So they, you know, slog through this thing and back up to the other side, and then there's like a barbed wire fence, and they go, you know, over, under, through that. And then they come to like this thicket that had been allowed to grow around the whole perimeter of this orchard to keep animals and people out. And it's like thorns and all that stuff. So they laid the sleeping bag on top of that and climb over into this orchard. And then there's one more ditch, same thing. Anyway, so finally they find themselves, wow, we made it. We're in this orchard. They're running around going all crazy. It's dark. They're picking up these things, they're you know, filling up the sleeping bag. Then they realized they had lost their orientation entirely. They're in this, it's just like row after row of indistinct trees, and they're like, what in the world? So then they see that a car like coming down A1A, and they're like, oh, that's where the road is, back over there. So they set out with this bag full of citrus that they had like picked up off the ground and picked off of trees and stuff, and they're dragging it, and they got to go, you know, through the 2 muddy ditches and through the barbed wire fence, and they end up, they're muddy and cut up, and there was one part of the story where one of the guy had to boost the other guy over something, and he's covered in mud from the waist down. So they get back out to the road, and they're waiting and waiting and waiting, pitch dark, and they're waiting. And so they see a car coming. They're like, oh, it's our buddy. So imagine what they look like, okay? It's our buddy. So the car starts to get close, and he jumps out in the road, to stop like that. It was like some lost family. Yeah. So they start kind of like, what are we going to do, They start to sort of walk back toward the campground, which is like 3 miles away. And then about half the way there, their buddy rolls up and opens the door of the van. They throw the sleeping bag in, jump in. By the time they get back to the campground, the sun is just starting to come up. It's just starting to get light out. They're all stoked. They drag their sleeping bag into the tent, and they dump it out to find that it was full of unripe grapefruits. Yeah. So we'll see how that ties into joy here at some point. So for the last 3 weeks, we have talked about hope, peace, and love. And hope, Pastor Kim told us the reasons for hope are the promises of God. Week 2, peace. The peace of Christ is a guard for your heart. Third string last week talked about love. And that guy said, without love, peace, hope, and joy are just 3 nice words. See, God works through roofers. If you look through in the Bible, God worked through and Jesus used who? A bunch of fishermen. You see these guys on TV? Those are the guys that Jesus picked. Those guys, the beep, 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 those guys. And carpenters. God can work through those guys too. So that brings us to joy. And I want to leap off here in talking about birthright. So a birthright is the idea of rights or inheritance being due a person merely based on the circumstances of their birth, place of birth, family lineage, or order of birth. In what we would call patriarchal societies, where you measure measure your lineage through your dad, and the dad has a son, and the son has a son, and that's how you measure your ancestry. In these patriarchal societies, the firstborn male would get the choice of everything. He would get the massive amount of inheritance, and all the other kids after him got some small portion of whatever was left over. In the history of this country, we will know that your citizenship is a birthright that you have. You're born here in this country, you're a citizen. That's it. You can become a citizen in some other way, but there's a lot of work involved. A birthright is something that you don't deserve, you haven't earned, and you don't have to work for. Sounds like grace to me, but, who am I? So for now, let's think of a birthright as something that's rightfully yours at birth, that you've done nothing to deserve other than to be born in a certain place or time. And we remember this shows up in the story of the prodigal son. It shows up in the life of Jesus as he's talking a lot in the letters of Paul about how Jesus was, the first fruit of God, the firstborn of God, the son that's got all the things, the inheritance. And we're going to look at one of several places. We're just going to look at one, but several places or instances of birthright in the Bible. We're going to go back to deep in the Old Testament, to the book of Genesis, and we're going to look at a guy named Esau. So we have Abraham. Everybody knows Abraham, right? Abraham had the son Isaac, and Abraham was super old, and his wife was super older, and God made a promise to him. And he did a bunch of other dumb stuff, but God still fulfilled his promise to him, because the reason for hope are the promises of God. So we have Abraham, and he had a son named Isaac. Isaac had 2 sons, twins, Jacob and Esau. So we're going to pick it up in Genesis 25, and this is a little reading here, but we're gonna follow along. When we get to the end, there's a little nugget here at the end of the story that I want us to pick up on. So starting in verse 21, Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" How many of you that have carried a child have said that? Why is this happening to me? So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger, which is like way against this whole like birthright firstborn thing. The older will serve the younger. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment, so they named him Esau. That probably, I bet there's like a whole sermon hiding in there to explore what that's all about. I'm just going to say that's a really weird detail. I mean, after this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. I have a friend that's 62, and I think he has a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and that makes my head hurt. Yeah. So I want to stop there just for a second and point out that this woman gave birth to these 2 twins, like not one and then a little bit of a break and then another one, but like back to back, and the one's holding onto the heel of the other. Ouch. Yeah, right. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. See the seeds of a problem there? So you have these 2 brothers who came from the womb competitively. They were even competitive, like that's what was going on. Like, why is this happening to me? Because the brothers are already fighting in there. Like, you can't tell them to go to their room. What are you going to do? There was a whole lot of shenanigans and tomfoolery between these 2 brothers. We're gonna just take a little bite of their shenanigans here. So Esau was a hunter, and he was Dad's favorite, and Jacob was kind of a homebody and a mama's boy. He was Mama's favorite. What could go wrong between these 2 guys? So back in verse 29, once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country, famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." Like, that's a pretty big demand. Like, oh yeah, you're hungry, huh? Yeah, why don't you give me your whole inheritance? Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." "Look, I'm about to die," Esau said. "What good is the birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. It wasn't even like Panera's, broccoli cheddar soup, or Chick-fil-A, the chicken soup that they have that's like, it was some lentil, some bean soup. Then Esau gave some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. And the NIV says, so Esau despised his birthright. And the NLT, the New Living Translation, says that Esau showed contempt for his rights as a firstborn. So the nugget that we're going to pick up there, and I think you're probably already picking up on it, is this guy Esau traded his birthright, his inheritance, for a bowl of soup. And you're sitting there thinking, like, what an idiot. Like, I wouldn't do anything like that. Hold my beer. So Esau traded something of enormous value in a moment of weakness for something that would satisfy him in that moment. The Bible points this out because he had contempt for his birthright. He did not realize the value of his birthright. there's a lot more to the story between these guys, but for this morning, I want to just put a pause there, and we'll come back, loop back to old Esau in a minute. So if you were here last week, you may recall that third string said, if I were preaching on joy, I would have to use Hebrews 12:1. And then I said, Chris, take notes. Chris might have been thinking about that Wednesday morning. Joke's on me. All right, Hebrews 12:2. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. His joy, we are told, is us. He endured the cross because of the joy that he had within him, and that thinking of us awakened and exposed that joy. And this joy that he had for us is not just like some kind of a general warm feeling, like oh, I get happy when I think that there's going to be people that are going to come behind me and be my hands and feet and do the things and love people, like I said. No, his joy was in knowing that what he was doing in that moment was making a way for us to be connected or reintroduced to the love of his Father in the same way that he had experienced. And that just welled up the joy that was inside of him. And it made it possible for him to endure the cross. Even on the cross, Jesus chose joy. It's a choice. It's a choice. Imagine what you could accomplish if your joy was set before you all the time. How much richer would your life be if every day you could get up and choose joy? Jesus chose joy. That's what Jesus does. He's come, I said last week, Jesus has come to demonstrate what mankind was intended to be like. So Jesus is demonstrating to us, I can choose joy on the cross. On the cross. You can choose joy because you don't like your job. You can do it. You got this, right? So in the English language, we have two words. We have happiness and we have joy. And we kind of use them interchangeably, I think. But they're distinct and they're different. If you chart happiness, it's like low lows and high highs and everything in between, and that's before breakfast. You know, because it's tied, it's like about right now. Like, is the temperature perfect in this room? All right, cool, I'm happy. Is it like 2 degrees too warm? Man, it's hot in here. Why turn it down? Your joy, on the other hand, if you charted it, it's just like, it's constant. Our realization of our joy and our exposure to it sort of charts with our happiness a little bit, but its actuality is that it's like just a flat, straight line, constant. Happiness is superficial. It's external, like this awesome shirt. It's a happy thing, but it's going to wear out. It's just a shirt. It's external, superficial, shallow, and tied to the moment. Happiness is fleeting. It's like trying to chase a bird or something. Difficult, right, honey? Yeah, chase a bird. Y'all should see me try to chase a loose chicken around the yard. My niece, Brooke, took a video of me trying to catch the rooster one day, and I was like, you would delete that right now, young lady. Don't you post that. Joy is something more elemental. It's internal. It's deeper. And it's tied to eternity. Happiness is tied to this moment right now, and it can be gone in an instant. Joy is tied to eternity, and it cannot be touched. Happiness is a Hostess cupcake. You can live on them, but you're not going to live long, and you're not going to live well. But it gets the job done in the moment, okay? Joy is a well-balanced meal of the bread of life. I'm going to get preachy now. The bread of life washed down with living water. It's substantial. Your joy is substantial. It's a well-balanced meal. It's nourishing. Happiness is fickle, like spending half your night crawling through muddy ditches and over briar patches to find out the end of the night that you came back with a muddy sleeping bag full of unripe grapefruit. It's like that. Joy is permanent and always in season. It's always ripe because it is fruit itself. It is Galatians 5:22. Fruit of the Spirit is joy, love. Fruit of the Spirit is peace, love. Help me out here. Joy, thank you. Goodness, gentleness, and self-control, and some other stuff. I know there was going to be a quiz. So we live in a society that puts enormous effort into pointing out shortcomings that you didn't even know you had. Then, in the hopes that you will attempt to buy the solution. Right? That's kind of how we're set up. That's what our economy is based on. Our economy is based on pointing out shortcomings that you didn't even know you had in the hopes that you will buy the solution. Go to work tomorrow so you can get paid Friday and buy the solution to the problem that you didn't even know you had until you were watching TV today. If you watch much TV, you will see there's a certain formula. Watch HGTV or any of these things. Then go walk around your house and you're like, man, what a dump. You know, I should buy those curtains that I saw. It's a work. It works. They wouldn't do it if it didn't work, you know. So the programming is designed to create a certain level of dissatisfaction for your current life, your car, your looks, your health, your diet, your economic, or your social status. Then they show you how you can buy the product to fulfill the desires that you didn't even know you had. You ever watch cartoons with a kid, like on Saturday morning? You know, the commercials for like all the sugary cereals and all the new toys. If you watch cartoons with a little kid, after almost every single one of those commercials, they'll look at you and say, I want that. I want that. Like, you didn't even know that existed 30 seconds ago. You may have heard it said that comparison is the thief of joy. And it really is. But I want to tell you that your joy cannot be stolen. I'm going to tell you what happens to your joy, but it cannot be taken away. It is yours. I've told our kids a lot of times, I think we have a slide for this dad quote. I quote myself and I say, Dad, if you get your needs and your wants mixed up, it's going to cause you a lot of trouble. You got to ask yourself, do I need that or do I want that? It's okay to get things that you want. It's cool, but they have to be a thing. They can't be the thing. And the same thing can be said for joy and happiness. Man, if you get your joy and your happiness mixed up, it's going to cause you a lot of trouble. You're going to find yourself with a lot of credit card debt. Yeah. And not very happy. Alongside the very basic physical needs of food, water, and shelter, I would put love as a basic fundamental need of all humans. Love is connection, and we are made to be connected to God and connected to each other. Without that connection, we suffer in much the same way as a person would suffer without food, water, and shelter. It's on a different, more fundamental level, but it's the same thing. You're exposed, you're malnourished. Love being at the root of all things, which I said last week, that love is like the thread that ties all this together, and it makes all of what we see around us possible, because that's what love does. Love creates. Love builds. Love brings together. Love makes new things, and it makes things new. Because of that, because love is at the root of everything, it produces peace, hope, and joy. Love is like the genesis, genesis of all of these things. And because of love, within you are produced peace, hope, and joy. Because of love, we will remember from last week, everything is possible. Because of love, our birthrights are peace, hope, and joy. Like Esau had his birthrights, which was like privilege, firstborn son. When dad dies, he gets like all of it, except the little bits, the scraps that the other kids get, right? Because of love, our birthrights are peace, hope, and joy. And we see that Esau gave his birthright away for a dumb bowl of soup. He gave away what was eternal for what was in the moment. Now I want to ask you, and as I've gotten the opportunity to ask myself since Wednesday morning, what do I try to sell my joy for? What do I try to trade my birthright for? I've been in jobs I hated. You ever had a job you couldn't stand, but you thought, well, they're paying me pretty good. Then you go in and you ask for a raise, and you're like, if they don't give me this raise, I'm quitting. Then they give you the raise. Now what? It's pretty cool for a couple of paychecks until you realize how much taxes you're paying now. You were happy for a minute. You put a little Band-Aid on that broken arm, but it's not going to be too much longer before the job's still terrible. You still hate it. And now you want more money to stay in the job. And it's just like this cycle. You're, like I talked about last week, you're treating the symptoms of the problem. You're not treating the problem. What do we trade for our joy? What dumb things do we try to trade our joy for? Matthew 6, 19 through 21. These are the red words of Jesus. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This week, I've been thinking about joy, and I told Pastor Chris that, he texted me Monday morning, and so on the way to work, I was like, turn off the radio, like, okay, God, like, drop it on me. And by the time I got to work, I had like a pretty good seed. And then, kind of been cultivating it and weeding and watering for the last few days, and it's grown into this idea. To think of joy as a treasure, like a diamond. It's your treasure. Sometimes it's like on display, it's all polished up, it's clean. It's like that Hope Diamond. You ever been to the Smithsonian and seen that big giant thing? And like people look at it and ooh and ah, and it's like all polished up and it's behind the clear glass and you can't even touch the glass. It's visible, highly visible. That's your joy sometimes. Sometimes your joy is covered with the grime of life and it's not apparent. That big diamond in the Smithsonian is worth what it's worth, whether it's clean or dirty. It does not matter. Your joy is worth what it's worth, and it does not change, and it's in you, and it's yours. And its value is not diminished by being covered up with the ick that life puts on you. And life will put some ick on you. Mm-hmm. When you make the choice to wipe that stuff out of the way, there it is, just like you left it. It's not less. It's not worth less. It sustains you from the inside while the world is starving you from the outside. Its value is priceless, and a lot of times your joy, it just needs a good, quick surface cleaning. My brother likes to say, there ain't nothing like a floor sweep on the job. Nothing like a floor sweep. There ain't nothing like a joy sweep. So I'm gonna get personal here and try to not look at my wife so I don't cry. I will tell you, men, the thing that I have learned that as you mature, you have two choices. You can either become a really grumpy old man or you gonna cry. Yeah. That's it. There's really no in between. You know. So in the last 4 months, we have really been through it. September, we had in our extended family a suicide. In October, so our situation is that it's myself, Tara, our 3 kids, and Tara's mom and stepdad in the house. In October, Tara's mom had pretty, I want to call it moderate surgery. Not major, it wasn't open heart surgery, but it was not a small deal. And she's still not healed. They're really going through that, and so she can't drive. There's a lot of stuff that she can't do for herself, and Tara is doing and being all of those things. In November, Tara's stepdad, who was her dad, who in here will tell you that sometimes the best dad is the stepdad? Amen. That's the guy that did what he didn't have to do. See? Well, he dropped dead 6 weeks ago tomorrow. Just like that, gone. And now last Monday, Tara's biological dad had a fall, and I'm going to be a little transparent here. This was something that we kind of prayed for, and hear me out. Hear me out. He's been in an apartment by himself, won't leave the apartment, won't let anybody in but Tara. 3 times a week, she goes over there and takes him stuff. He sees people that aren't there. He's like that movie, he sees dead people. He sees dead people. He's a sharp guy, and he's lost his marbles. And we knew that the only way that we could get him out of that apartment and into someplace, he won't go to the doctor, he wouldn't let anybody in to see him, and all that was if he had a medical emergency and he had to go out of there in an ambulance. That's the only way. And so we've been sort of like low-key praying, like, Lord, let's let Papa have a medical emergency, please. And that prayer got answered, and we weren't ready for that Monday. And he's not cooperating. He's not playing nicely, and that's put a lot of strain on an already strain of strains. But I want to tell you that when my father-in-law Brian passed away, we had so much, we were loved on so well, and we had so many great friends and family that came and spent so much time at the house, and we laughed, oh my gosh, and we had such a good time. Crazy. How is this possible that we could have such a good time? I mean, I have not laughed more in years than I probably laughed the week that we had like all of the things going on before the funeral. Last night, or Friday morning at 3 a.m., Sammy and I got out, it's our 24-year-old daughter, drove to Brooklyn, packed her apartment into a Chrysler Pacifica minivan. And I'm going to tell you right now, we passed a U-Haul trailer that said, fits a queen-size bed. And I was like, take that U-Haul trailer, the Chrysler Pacifica also fits a queen-size bed. I had to come back with the seat like kind of straighter up than I would like to have it. We did that, drove there in the rain like Friday morning, did all that stuff, and came back yesterday morning. And when we got home, we sat down in our house and we laughed and we had such a good time. How is this possible? I'm going to read you a line from my father-in-law's eulogy. It is a great mystery of faith that we can have the profound sadness of mourning and the great joy of the promise of eternity simultaneously within us. This was at his funeral. Today, we choose to lean into the great joy. You chase happiness, but you choose joy. And you can choose it every single day, and it does not exhaust you. Chasing happiness is exhausting, and it'll leave you looking like this. Choosing joy is refreshing. I think we're going to wrap up now. And Chris, I'm going to ask you, after the week you've been through, you got joy? A lot? This morning you said you were filled with joy. Well, you are. Miss Marcia, you've had a pretty rough year. Are you filled with joy? You are filled with joy. How can we laugh the week between the death of my father-in-law and his funeral so much? Joy. Joy. It's been put in us, and it can't be touched. It can't be damaged. It can't be made less. It can just get the ick of the world on it. So if you've walked with the Lord for any amount of time, you will understand his joy is firmly within you. He has put it there. The more you walk in life with Jesus, the more you will come to realize that the joy he has put in you cannot be touched, cannot be stolen, cannot be made less. What does happen is that the dirt and trash of living in a broken system like we do can get piled onto and obscure your joy. In the same way that we have certain birthrights as a natural born citizen of the United States, you have certain birthrights as a supernaturally reborn citizen of heaven on earth. This is what Jesus was talking about when he told Nicodemus, "Very truly I tell you that no one can enter the kingdom of heaven unless they are born of water and the Spirit. Flesh gives birth to flesh, but Spirit gives birth to spirit." The fruit of the Spirit that God puts within you, that Jesus said, I'm sending somebody else. It's good that I go away because I'm sending a helper. The helper puts in you this joy. As a reborn citizen of heaven and earth, we have the unmerited right to be loved so that we can walk and live in peace, hope, and joy. Joy is your birthright. We can all learn a valuable lesson from Esau that was recorded as being born strangely covered in red hair. I don't know. You can learn a valuable lesson from him, though, in spite of what he must have looked like. He held his birthright in contempt and traded it for a bowl of soup. What we can learn is that we have the choice to maintain the treasure of our joy. Stop trading it for stuff that doesn't matter. As we spend a little bit more time with the Lord this morning, let's ask him to wipe the grime of life from your joy and expose it in its fullness of beauty so that you can enjoy life. He's ready. He is willing.